Welcome back, this is Jungle King 007 working on the Saturn today. Today's issue is a coolant leak. It is actually coming from this side of the motor, and fortunately what this means is it's part of the intake. There is actually a little tube that goes right this way and it connects with the heater core that's inside the cab. This is a noted issue on these vehicles because the thing's probably about 3 or 4 inches long and it cracks. And that's what my issue is. Right now you can't see it because the air intake is in the way, but in order to fix this, there's really one of two ways you can do it. First is completely removing the intake manifold off the vehicle, which is what I'm going to be doing today, more for safety reasons and so I know I'm doing it correctly. The second one is there's a way that you can do it with the intake on the vehicle using a multi-tool or some sort of saw that can cut in through the side and just remove that piece. But I'm going to do a more thorough removal because I also want to replace the gasket that's on that intake. With this vehicle having over 200,000 miles, I highly doubt it's been replaced. And when I got underneath it the last time, after I shut it off, there was noticeable bubbles coming from underneath it. So I want to replace it so that it doesn't act like pretty much like an air vacuum leak. So let's get started and start pulling some of this stuff off so I can get to the intake. I want to walk you through real quick what I'm going to be doing. In order to get to the intake, there's a couple things you got to remove. Obviously, first is your air intake here. Take that off. I also got to take the throttle body off. Got to remove the power steering pump. Need to remove the, if I can see it, here it is, right here, the serpentine belt. We got to get this off, obviously, so we can get the power steering pump off. Also, I need to take this mount off, and the mount that is actually underneath this box. So I gotta take this off so we can get it. That is so I can rock the motor forward in order to take the intake out. As it sits right now, there really isn't much room in the back to work because there's multiple little nuts that I gotta take off in order to get this intake off. Also, we gotta remove the fuel rail and then really some other odds and ends, hoses, the throttle cable, all that kind of stuff needs to get out of the way so we can get to this. So that should just be a quick run through. At this point, I'm just gonna let the cameras run and watch me pull as much of this stuff off here. So let's do that now. All right, so I'm not sure if it's visible, but if you notice the seam on that pipe there, yeah, I got a lot of coolant leaking out, but just above that is is a crack. It's actually running just above it, maybe about, let's say, 1/8 of an inch, maybe? Yeah, 1/8 of an inch. And it's actually going all the way back. I don't know if I can get it all the way. It's actually going all the way back where it finishes, where it's not wet anymore. It basically spans this entire piece. So that's part of where the leak is. I'm actually thinking that's not the main one, because every time I pull over, when I put new coolant in there, even though that was wet, it wasn't soaked like everything else that was in here. It was just like afterwards, like if I shot it down, it would start leaking from there because there was still pressure in the system. I'm thinking there was another crack underneath it, but I need to get this intake off so I can double check that and know for sure. But just to give you a quick look at what I'm trying to fix, that's the crack. So let's keep getting this off. I've gotten most of it off now. What we're now having to do is I need to get those nuts. That one there, bottom left, and then there's one underneath cylinder 2 or 3. Yeah, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there's 7 bolts total, or nuts, I should say. Yeah, so I think there's 7 or 8, but I'll count them after I get this thing off. But we need to run this forward, or push this forward a little bit, because if you notice, there isn't really much room back here. So once I get those off, we won't be able to clear the studs there. So let's rock this engine forward so I can get this intake off. All right, just to show you real quick, here's the upper motor mount. They call them dog bone mounts or strut mounts. This one has been modified a little bit. Those are polyurethane bushings. I should have a video out shortly showing those, but these are really simple to take off. Got to get the airbox out and then bolt here. Bolt here. This one's a 15 mil. This one right back here is a 14 millimeter. Let's see if I can get a light in there. Yeah, one way back there is a 14 millimeter. Just pull those off. Now, before you take this off, you got to support the motor. I'm about to do that now with my jack, because I also have to take this motor mount off and make sure that it is supported by a jack with maybe a wood block, or if you've got a hard rubber block on your jack, the arm, that will make sure you don't dent up the underside of your oil pan. So let's get doing that now. Now let's see if it'll come off. Yeah, that's what it was. There we go. All right. There's our prize. And let's take a good look at this thing now. Let's put it on the table. Hopefully you can see it. I tried to get some silver Sharpie on this just to outline that that crack. As you can see, it goes right along here. I think it stops about there. It actually doesn't go all the way over here, which surprises me. I thought it was going to be this whole length, but it's this crack, that's it. And that's what has been causing all my issues and all my leaking. I also noticed a crack here and I think it was cracked right here. So what we're doing is we're actually going to cut this off of the intake. There is a kit for it. That's what this thing is. This one's from Dorman. Basically what it is a standalone, and this is actually made of metal. So compared to the plastic, this should be indestructible. Comes with 2 studs, nuts, and a gasket. I'm also, since I've got all this stuff off, got the fuel rail, got the intake off, I'm replacing the intake gasket as well as the O-rings on the fuel injectors. So what we need to do is cut this piece off. Let's look at it from here. What we're going to be cutting around, we're not going to touch this. We need to leave this. And I believe that's how it works. This is how it's going to, it needs to sit, of course, in its place here. So what I need to do is I need to cut all down this and then all of this out so that this can take its place. Now I want to double check something because I don't see a secondary hole here where this back one would be. Let's check the back of the engine and see if there is another spot where that stud goes.
Right there center is the coolant hole. Looks like to its right is 1 stud, so we're going to use that, and to its left we're actually going to need to remove that stud in order to put the secondary, or at least the replacement stud in to hold that pipe in. So let's actually clean this off too. I'm going to do that just to get a better seal. Looks like, wow, there's a lot of leaking there. Yeah, I'm going to want to clean all this off first before I put that back on so it seals a little better. But yeah, just a good look at the back end of this thing. Ooh, there's a lot of carbon buildup. I guess I should be expecting that with as many miles on this thing. But yeah, if you haven't seen the back end of this thing, now you have. So let's clean off that intake. Let's put those studs in, and let's first cut that intake piece off. So let's get to it. So I got the manifold and a vise. We're gonna go ahead and cut this off. So let's do that now. We're using a hacksaw. Got my bigger saw. Alright. That's what we wanted to do. Took that piece off. Yep. Let me try to clean this up a little bit, try to maybe cut a little bit along here. That should be fine. We still got this piece here so it can hold the actual intake on. So we're good there. Just cut this piece off. I may just refine this a little bit, take this piece off, just so it has a little better look, I guess we can call it. And I'm also gonna try to cut a little bit this way. But for now, I've got that piece off. So let me refine that and we'll move on to putting this back on. Alright, so I got those 2 new studs installed. The one that was sitting right here, this thing was a pain in the butt to get off. I actually had to use a couple different vice grips to even get a good grip on it. There's actually a Torx, I think it's there was a male Torx head on this stud. Well, that snapped off after trying to loosen it up, but simply just pull this out. This one's actually a smaller thread than here, but just tighten it up with a couple turns with the vice grips and they'll be in place. Like this one, yeah, this one's not even moving anywhere. So now we just need to install the tube. Or the pipe. There's a gasket that goes on in the pipe, and then we'll tighten that one down. But first, actually, putting the studs in is the first thing. I think what we need to do now is put the intake back on. For now, I'm kind of letting it soak because this thing is nasty. I wish I had some white paper because this stuff is black, and there was thick goo, whatever you want to call it, oil, sludge in this thing. So I'm trying to get as much of that out of there as possible. Actually, let's see if I can do it. I mean, that's actually after about 20 minutes of letting it soak, and yeah,
it's just nasty. But I'm trying to clean that out as best I can. This is really hot water and a lot of Dawn soap. Usually Dawn is the best stuff. I also have some Purple Power degreasing agent that I'm going to use possibly. Let's at least let this finish cleaning up. We'll replace that gasket and then reinstall this. Alright, so intake gasket installed. Now this is the main one. There's also another one here to your throttle body. This one actually still looks really good, so I'm just going to leave it. I didn't buy a replacement for it, but it just seals this on here when it's bolted down. So you can replace that if you want. I think it's only a couple bucks. Do so. You'll probably get, if you see that this thing is pretty much flat, and that's what was happening with that other one here. It was completely flat and not giving a good seal, so I replaced it. So let's put the parts back together on this thing and let's install it on the car. Alright, that's everything I can install on the bench. Let's go ahead and put it back on the car. Let's see if I can position this like it was before. Try not to hit the gasket anywhere. There we go. All you have to do is just line up the studs with the corresponding holes on the intake. There she goes, lines right up in place. This exhaust piece, you gotta find the hole it goes into. I'll do that in just a second. I gotta get on the other side. There it is. Okay, that's lined up. Now I'm just gonna hand tighten these nuts down for now. Put all the nuts back into place. For now, just to put this in have it held down. There's no really particular order at this point. When you're torquing them down, I gotta find the spec to do it. That's when you want to worry about torque specs. Let me find where I put all the nuts. Just to let you be aware, 1 here, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is down here. So actually it's 5. This one is a pain to get to down here in the edge. You actually have to take the power steering pump out of the way. There's only 3 bolts holding it to the side of the block, and just move it out just so you can get to this nut. Alright, so let's put the coolant pipe on. Got it right here. Also got the gasket. Gasket goes in like this. Seat that all the way down. And then take the pipe. Make sure the little knob is at the top, or the little pipe, because that goes to your external reservoir. That goes all the way over to the other side of the car. We'll set that down on here. Now, actually, off camera, I took this back off because this side right here was actually touching up against this side. So I had to take this off. I had to cut down a little bit more so this piece right here would clear the side of the intake. So you're gonna have to cut really close to this cylinder's intake pipe. So be very careful. Get yourself some really small precision saws, or if you're really good with a router or a Dremel tool, use that to Dremel down as close as you can. So 2 nuts here. Let's put this one on, and the other one. Hopefully this one will spin because it is really close. Let's see if I can get my hand out of the way. Yep, there we go. I believe that's tight enough. Let's check this one more time. Yep. I'm gonna call those tight. And that one's not going anywhere. Alright, so now the process is to torque these down. If I read my book correctly, it's 114 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, it's inch-pounds. Probably roughly translate to somewhere under 10 foot-pounds, but 114 inch-pounds is what we need to shoot for. Now there is a certain sequence, according to the book I've been reading, is to go from the inside out. So basically start with this middle one. I'm going to go here, 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 and then here. It would be a torque graduation, so I think it said do it in 3 intervals to get up to 114. So I'm going to start with 30. Let me set mine to 30. Yep, there it is. Well, that's 30, and then I just drop the socket. All right, next one, let's do 60. All right, 90. All right, last bit is 114. We got them all at 114. Now let's just continue putting everything back on. Got to put the throttle body on. Got to get the fuel rail back on. Obviously, all the hoses and the wires back on. And so let's got everything hooked up, and let's go ahead and prime the system again and start it for the first time. Make sure I got oil. Yep, that's still good. Let's see what my coolant level's like, because it was dripping a little bit ago. All right, that's still good. All right, let's start her up. Ooh, she's running rough. It's also been a little bit since she's been started, so we'll give it a minute. I should check and make sure I don't see a leak. I'm not seeing anything. Let's go underneath. Well, something's still leaking. Let me figure out what that is. Oh, there it is. Alright, so we had a little bit of an issue. The moment I started up, there was a lot of coolant leaking, and obviously you would think, new part, you would see that this would fix the problem. Well, it actually made it worse, and I'll show you why. I've got this piece off. Let's go to the floor. Let's hope it does it, because I was doing it on my countertop earlier. Now, it was... yeah, you see, just enough. I should not be able to do this. This should be a machine surface, and that should sit steady. But what I was finding is this bottom part here was completely wet, and it was just leaking like a sieve right out there. Originally, I thought it was the studs were not holding in place. While they are not the culprit, I'm still replacing them with some ones that have a longer stud that goes into the head. But this right here scares me. Alright, so I wanted to do a little bit more of a thorough look at this piece here of what is going on. I mean, as you can see, I'm moving it around and it's moving back and forth. You're not supposed to do that. With a machine surface, this should be rock solid. It should stay there and not move. I should not be able to press on one side or the other and it rock like that. What's happening here is I had a good look at it, and how this thing is made is this piece right here is a stamped piece of metal. And what probably happened is, as you can see right here, this right here is the ridge, and then it's flat here. It's kind of just a 90-degree curve right here, or supposed to be. And what happens is they almost have like this piece of this cookie cutter press, and it comes and presses down on this piece of metal and cuts this out. Well, what probably happened was these two pieces got warped, and there was no machining done to make this a flat surface so that it doesn't do this. I got some feeler gauges out here, a 0.5 millimeter and 0.53 millimeters. The first one, we'll do the 0.5 millimeter. I'm going to press on this end here, and I'm going to do it on both sides. So let's do the 0.5 millimeter first. And you can barely, let's see if I can do it without getting my hand in the way. Press here, I'm going to flatten it out. I mean, there is almost a 0.5 millimeter of clearance here without that piece moving. Let's flip it over here, do it this way. I'm going to press on this side. I mean, I glide right under that. I should not be able to I should not be able to do that. All right, here's 0.53 millimeters. Let's see if I can show you. Here's 0.53. Let's press again. Again, there is a lot of clearance here. I shouldn't be able to do this. Let's do it on the other side. We'll flip it over. Now it is barely touching right here, but that still means that there is that much clearance. And that is basically what's been happening. When I pulled this off, this entire bottom piece right here was soaked. Everything else was fine. So which indicated that right down here was the issue where it was leaking. That is a big problem, especially when I have the understanding that company's making a product and it should be a quality product. I'm under the assumption when I get into these types of repairs, I should be able to go all the way through it without having any issues. Something like this, when I have to modify a component that's already on my vehicle in order to make it work, that puts me in a bind because that vehicle is my daily driver. If something like this is to slow me down, I'm either, like a lot of people, I could be out of work. I'm out of money, obviously. I need to hopefully warranty this. If it doesn't get warranted, I have to figure out some way to modify this in order to make it work. I have to flatten that back piece off, back portion of it down in order to make that fit correctly. Because even with the gasket, this is not going to seal as it sits. Again, I should not have to do this. My options, I'm going to work on them. Just to let you know, this is my oven top. This is the only flattest location that I have in my household. It's a glass top, so it's going to be flat. I've tried this on multiple different surfaces, rough and smooth, and this piece does the same thing. Letting you know right here, fair warning, if you do start doing this, make sure that that is flat before you start cutting on anything. If you have a small leak like I did originally, I could have lumbered on that for a little bit longer until I got a part that's correct. So just be forewarned, you might get a part like this, because to be perfectly honest, the brand that this was, it was the only one that I could find that was readily available and inexpensive. The inexpensive portion of that may come into play because these are mass produced and sometimes quality control is not the best, but to be perfectly honest, quality control for a $2 part all the way up to a $10,000 part should not be different. It should be the same no matter what. Back after a couple days, the new part has arrived. This one right here on the right is the new one out of the box. This right here is the one I was having issues with. I've been playing with them off camera just to see if there are any differences, and there actually are. On the previous little rant, I guess we can call it, I was pushing on the back of this and it got me about a 0.5 millimeter of a clearance. Now that may tell a lot, but what I'm actually going to do this time is press down where the holes are, so where a nut would be pressing down on it, just to show how much of a difference there was. Basically, if it was flat, it would still have a gap. So what I've actually got here, and I was testing it again with a 1/4 millimeter feeler gauge. So here's the old one. I'm going to press down and firmly press down, and right where it was leaking, I mean, it's not even moving it. There is a gap here, and it goes all the way up to, look at the tip right about here. And on the other side, it's a little bit lower, but that's still a pretty significant gap that I shouldn't be able to do that. Now, yes, there is a gasket in there, but with as much of a gap there is here, there shouldn't be that issue. Now, let's do the second one. This one still, wobbles like the last one, but it's not as bad. Well, maybe it is. I thought it was. Let me check it. I mean, it doesn't come down as far. The other one, I think it was coming up for here. This one's down here, and it stops on the back here about 1/4 of an inch lower. So, but still, with a gasket, that may help a little bit, but I'm still kind of concerned because if I flip this over, I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, there are little marks on it, almost as if something got into the paint when this was put together and machined. Well, I don't know if these were even machined. It looks like it's been cut out of a stamped piece of metal and then just welded on, painted, and sent out the door. I don't know the process, I can't tell you that, but this to me is not flat. So what I'm gonna have to do is probably start with some fine grit sandpaper, wet sandpaper, and just try to smooth it out as best as I can, because I don't want this leaking again. And with basically both of them coming in like this, that kind of scares me. So at this point, I need to get back on the road. I need to get this installed, modified to how I can get it fixed to the way I need it. An additional thing I want to show you, these are the studs that come out of the kit, and if you look at them, there isn't really much thread. This right here is the portion of the thread that's going into the head to hold this in place. This side is for the nut. Let me show you the original stud that was removed from the vehicle. Now, this right here, it looks like it's missing almost about a ½ inch of thread. Let's see if I can angle it a little bit better. This, I would rather have this much thread, because if you're starting to tighten this down, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 threads holding it onto the block, and that's an aluminum head. So if you were to over tighten this, you could strip those threads and be stuck even worse than what for me, stuck even worse than what I was before. When I was tightening this down originally, that's kind of my problem. This is what I was thinking was happening. Because the one closest to the intake, I was tightening it down, and then I felt it move, and I stopped because I was thinking maybe this thing wasn't tight enough. I mean, with that little thread going into a bolt hole that should be this long, these threads will kind of distribute the weight, or at least the torque that you're putting on it a little bit better. This, not so much, and you could strip it out. So be very careful when you put this on. New pipe is in now, gasket's on, the 2 bolts. I left the original studs in there because I've been having a hard time finding some with a longer stud to go into the head. So I'm just going to leave these as they are for now. One thing I may do later on is take those out. As long as it's not leaking, I may just leave it. Under no circumstances is anybody supposed to try this. I'm doing it out of necessity. So, let's try it again. Where are my keys? Oh, they're in the car. Ugh. There she goes. Let's see what it's looking. Get those cables off too. Not seeing any leaks this time around. That vacuum leak is coming from. Okay. Check the coolant level real quick. Hasn't pulled much down. Now let's check underneath. Don't see anything leaking like it was last time. Cool. Alright, so at this point, everything's done. Coolant's been topped off. Also, just check for leaks. It looks like it's doing good, so I'm going to stop the video here. So hopefully the process I showed you was helpful. Also, seeing that there was a little bit of a struggle will hopefully help you not get into that mess. So definitely check your parts before you start putting things together so you don't get into an issue or a situation like I was. This is Jungle King 007. Have a great day.